poor visibility on the 31st of May 1916 was compounded by the smoke of 250 ships hurtling towards the greatest clash of super dreadnoughts the world would ever see. During the run to the south, two of Beatty's battlecruisers, Indefatigable and Queen Mary, had exploded when flash fires reached their magazines. Then at 4:38, HMS Southampton sent an electrifying signal. Urgent priority. Have sighted enemy battle fleet. Beatty held his course for another 5 minutes to confer for himself what Commodore Goodenough had seen. Then he turned to the north to lead the German High Seas Fleet into the path of the Grand Fleet under Admiral Jellicoe. At 5:45, Beatty's lookouts caught sight of the armoured cruiser Black Prince. He knew that this was one of the armoured cruisers screening Jellicoe's force, which meant that the Grand Fleet itself was just over the horizon. A light cruiser screening the Grand Fleet, HMS Chester, spotted a large ship looming out of the mist. They thought it must be one of Beatty's fleet and flashed a recognition signal. The stranger flashed the correct response. What the British did not know was that one of the German torpedo boats had already intercepted the British recognition signals and passed them on to the rest of the fleet, so it came as a complete surprise when it opened fire. Chester's forecastle was hit and the starboard side badly holed. The rangefinder and his crew were blown overboard and its main mast was shot away. Within 3 minutes, most of her 10 guns had been hit. Shells tore through steel plating as if it was paper and threw pieces of shell and splinter in all directions. The forward wing shelters were completely riddled through. They were damaged about 2/3 of her water deck and all her boats, even damaged 4 of the Carly floats beyond repair. When leading stoker Stevens came up on deck, he found a scene of carnage. Most of the gun crews had been killed or had their legs shorn off at the ankles. The survivors were taken down to the central ammunition passage where they could be looked after by sick berth attendants. Everybody not directly involved in fighting the ship did what they could to help the wounded. This included rating from the paymaster's department or cooks like Marcus Bailey. He had come all the way from the West Indies to serve in the Royal Navy. After a lifetime as a cook on merchant vessels, he did what he could for the men sitting smoking cigars with their bloody stumps in tourniquet legs out front, but most of them would be dead within an hour. There was still one boy of 16 standing at his post, waiting for orders. He was wearing a special hood called a telepad with a voice tubes going directly from his mouth into his ears. He was effectively plumbed into the ship's communication system, so that he acted as a living loudspeaker to relay orders to the gun crew that were now far past hearing. Despite his wounds, he would remain at his exposed position until the end of the battle. Only after his duty had been done did he seek help. He lived long enough to reach port and was transferred to a hospital in Grimsby. His mother was sent a telegram by the matron in charge of his ward saying, "Your son is dangerously ill. Come." She did, but she could not get there fast enough. John Trafford Cornwell's last words were, "Give mother my love. I know she is coming." His devotion to duty won him the Victoria Cross and a hero's funeral. His coffin was placed on a gun carriage, drawn by sailors and escorted by men of the Royal Naval Division. 80 of his former schoolmates joined the procession, as well as the local Boy Scouts and Sea Cadets. HMS Chester raced back towards the safety of the Grand Fleet. She had been hit 17 times. 2 officers and 33 men were already dead, while others, like Cornwell, would die later. Racing the other way came Admiral Arbuthnot in HMS Defence, the flagship of the 3rd Battlecruiser Squadron. He had spotted SMS Frankfurt, part of the group of light cruisers that had just mauled HMS Chester. Arbuthnot was a pugnacious individual who was itching to get into the action. He had arrived in the South Atlantic too late to join Sturdy at the Battle of Falklands in 1914. He was determined not to allow a second opportunity to slip through his fingers. He charged through the line of Beatty's battlecruisers so close to HMS Warrior that she had to veer to starboard to avoid a collision. The German light cruisers fell back into the safety of the mist, but then Arbuthnot spotted the crippled SMS Wiesbaden. He fired salvos into her, leaving her on fire and listing heavily. But it was going to take a lot more than that to stop the Wiesbaden, who fired back with a 5.9-inch gun and hit Defence's turret. On Lutzow, the gunnery officer saw a shadowy form in the haze. He thought it was the armoured cruiser and swung his guns towards it. Just as he opened fire, another voice shouted, "Halt! Halt! Passion! Don't shoot! That is our Rostock!" He fired anyway and kept firing. A salvo struck the forward part of the ship, and moments later she disappeared into a huge cloud of smoke as the forward magazine detonated. They could see her picket boat blown into the sky by the force of the explosion and spinning away like a Catherine wheel above the mushroom cloud of flame and smoke. This was not the Rostock. This was HMS Defence. As the huge black cloud evaporated, there was not even a trace of the ship left. She had simply disappeared in the explosion. 24 hours earlier, Arbuthnot had been playing tennis at Cromarty with Lady Jellicoe. Now he and every single one of the 903 men on board was dead. After HMS Defence disappeared in a cloud of smoke, the Germans turned their fire to the second ship in the line, HMS Warrior. Heavy shells burst on the ship, smashing her upper decks. One raided the bridge, another killed 40 men when it wiped out the aft distribution station. Then the whole fabric of the ship shuddered and the lights went out. A German shell had burst in her engine room, flinging shards of steel through boilers and steam pipes. Superheated steam filled the compartment, scalding many of the engine room crew to death. Engineer Commander Henry Kitching heard the roar of water and steam. His first thought was that they'd been hit by a torpedo. Then the survivors ran forward, one of them with blood still streaming down his face. Their instinct was to try and get out, but the ladders had been wrecked. They had to grope their way forward through the dark using handrails along the platforms at the top of the cylinders to try and get to the port engine room to try to escape through the mess deck. When they got there, a stoker told them not to go through as it was already on fire. Commander Kitching tried nevertheless, but was driven back by the thick, blinding fumes. He felt like a rat in a trap, unable to go forwards, unable to go backwards, and with heavy armoured hatches sealing him in from above. Then one of his men called for his attention. He was pointing up at a glimmer of light above. It was one of the holes where HMS Warrior's armour had been ripped open, giving them a chance of escape. With one engine destroyed, Warrior's speed dropped to 10 knots. They were a sitting duck for the Germans, but their rescue came from an unlikely source. HMS Warspite had been following dangerously close by into HMS Malaya, and the helmsman had to put his wheel hard over to avoid a collision. They were travelling at 24 knots, and the forces involved were too much for the steering engine. It seized up, locking the rudder in place. The captain immediately ordered his engineers to try and restore control of the rudder, but he didn't try to stop. Stopping in front of the German line would have been suicide. Instead, he made a complete circle within 10,000 yards of Shear's line, circling around the crippled HMS Warrior. The Germans immediately switched their firing from Warrior to firing at Warspite. White flashes of flame burst from her as the shells hit. She was hit 29 times, while she was firing back with all 8 of her 15-inch guns. The Germans ceased firing as HMS Warspite vanished into the haze. When Midshipman Bell Fell got up on deck, he barely recognised his ship. There were splinters everywhere. Every single boat was gone, and a fire had broken out in the starboard 6-inch battery, and many men had been burned. She was right down in the water and listing so far that the quarterdeck was nearly awash. When he got up to the bridge to report, Captain Philpott asked, "How do you like that, boy?" To which the young officer could only reply, "Not much, sir." Warspite withdrew to the north, and Admiral Evan Thomas ordered her to return to Rosyth. Warspite's misfortune had been Warrior's salvation. She had been able to limp away while the Germans concentrated their fire on the larger ship. Warrior had been hit 15 times and about 400 men killed or wounded. She would eventually be taken in tow by the little seaplane carrier HMS Engadine. Vice Barden had been crippled either by a salvo from Indomitable or Invincible. She was now a sitting duck in much the same position that HMS Warrior would have been. The 3rd Light Cruiser Squadron used her like a 5,000-ton steel punching bag, pumping 58 salvos into her before moving on. The destroyer HMS Onslow also had a crack at her with her 4-inch guns before lining up a torpedo run on the ship's port bow. One missed, but a second one hit the unmanoeuvrable German cruiser beneath the conning tower. She then fired her last 2 torpedoes at the German battle line. One passed just ahead of SMS Kaiser, but then Onslow was hit 2 times by 10.5-inch shells from SMS Rostock, which took her out of the battle. Some British destroyers and a 4-funnel cruiser attempted to make a break to the west ahead of the Rosenberg, They were led by HMS Shark under the command of Loftus-Jones. At 5,000 yards, Shark fired her torpedoes. They missed. The Germans fired back, straddling her. One shell hit, detonating a torpedo while it was still in the tube. 200 kilograms of Amatol exploded, wreaking havoc in the small destroyer. The 4-inch gun was blown clean off the deck, and her fuel oil suction lines were destroyed. This starved her boilers of fuel and brought her slowly to a stop. The aft gun was soon destroyed, leaving them with just one amidships. This was manned by a midshipman and 2 able seamen. Commander Jones went to help them, only to have his right leg blown off just above the knee. As a chief stoker applied a tourniquet to the bloody stump, he noticed that the ensign was not properly hoisted. He ordered it replaced with a new one and then told his crew to put on their lifebelts. Almost immediately after this, HMS Shark was struck by a torpedo. Loftus-Jones went down with his ship, with its flag still flying. He was awarded the Victoria Cross. 15 of his crew were able to get onto the 2 remaining Carly floats. There were only 7 of them left when they were picked up by a Danish freighter called the Vidar the next morning. Some, like Chief Stoker Newcomb, would not live much longer than it took to get onto deck. The cruiser Acosta continued on her way, but was spotted by the Lutzow. Her captain, Lieutenant Commander John Barrett, turned to fight. He launched torpedoes at 4,500 yards before being hit in the engine room, which killed the engineer officer and 4 sailors. From the Germans' perspective, the first part of the battle had been a tremendous success. The British lost 2 battle cruisers and an armoured cruiser and several destroyers for a German loss of only 2 torpedo boats. Even the wrecked Wiesbaden was still firing. From this point of view, the loss of the Shark did not add much to the German tally, but it was the first hint, along with the 3rd battlecruiser squadron, of what lurked ahead. Beatty's battlecruisers steamed into a patch of mist, with their huge funnels silhouetted against a bank of red cordite smoke and lit by sheets of flame as they fired salvo after salvo at the enemy coming up behind them. The Germans raced after them. As the mist parted, the Germans saw a horrifying sight ahead of them. 28 British dreadnoughts and 9 battlecruisers were ranged against 16 German dreadnoughts and 5 battlecruisers. The British trap had been sprung. The main body of the British fleet entered action at 6:10. It would hardly be in a better place if Jellicoe had been in control of both fleets, and the scene was set for the clash of the Leviathans. Next week, I'm going to be talking about the clash of the battle fleets. If you'd like to hear more about that, then please like and subscribe so that the algorithm might show it to you. If not, then thank you for listening this long.